Welcome everyone to today's Reframe and Refresh. We will be discussing new perspectives on Asian and Muslim identity in America. And I know it's sure to be an exciting conversation with Julie Mallozzi, Sofian Khan, Lailanie Gadia, and I will be moderating it. Well, I'm going to officially get us started. Welcome to Reframe and Refresh. This is a conversation on new perspectives on Asian and Muslim identity in America. My name is Larissa Lam, and I am the director of Far East Deep South, a documentary about the early Chinese families in Mississippi during segregation and the Chinese exclusion era. I am an Asian female with black slicked back hair and a ponytail. I am wearing a black top with gold buttons on my shoulders. I am sitting in front of an orange and yellow background that says New Day Films and Reframe and Refresh, along with my Far East Deep South poster. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm also on the steering committee of New Day Films, and I welcome you here today. For those of you who are not familiar with New Day Films is the sponsor of today's discussion. And New Day Films is a unique filmmaker-run distribution cooperative providing award-winning films to educators, community groups, government agencies, public libraries, and businesses since 1971. We are democratically run by more than 150 filmmaker members, and New Day is committed to reflecting greater diversity, representation, and inclusion. New Day Films films have been broadcast on PBS, HBO, and other media outlets. It's celebrating over 50 years of delivering dynamic and provocative storytelling with filmmakers who have won hundreds of awards, including Emmys and Oscars, including this year's nominee at the Oscars for Best Documentary Short, S. Leo Chang for Island in Between. So we are in very good company here at New Day Films. Today's discussion is not meant to be the be-all, end-all on an exhaustive conversation on this topic, but hopefully in the limited time we have, we can have a catalyst for more conversation. And if there are things that spark your interest, we encourage you to keep asking questions and continuing to learn about these topics and discussion and films beyond today. All right, everyone, we're ready now to bring on our panel. Let's start with Sofian Khan, the producer of An Act of Worship, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. He is an Emmy-nominated filmmaker and founder of Capital K Pictures. He directed, produced, and shot The Interpreters, a documentary following Afghan and Iraqi interpreters being targeted for their work helping American forces, which is also available through New Day Films. His episode of the PBS American Masters series, In the Making, co-directed with Joseph Patel, received a Webby Award and an NAACP Image nomination. In 2022, Sofian directed an episode of the series Takeout with Lisa Ling on HBO Max. He was one of Doc NYC's 40 Under 40 in 2019 and a Sundance Producing Fellow. His short work has appeared on Field of Vision, The Atlantic, Topic, Al Jazeera, and NBC Digital. Welcome, Sofian. Thanks for being here. And we want to show the audience a little bit about An Act of Worship, which explores the impact of anti-Muslim rhetoric and policy on young Muslims coming of age after 9/11. Let's show the trailer for An Act of Worship.
Hi, so I'm gonna quickly just play some random piece of music over here and hope it goes well. See how it goes, okay? Bet it's gonna be so bad.
I have a baby sister. I like her very much.
What's her name?
Amina.
My dad used to sit on the edge of my bed every night and recite a prayer of protection over my sister and I. My parents got calls telling them, your children will be next. That experience taught them to keep their religion and culture hidden.
In the first day of class, the teacher made me stand up and tell people what it's like to be Iraqi. Like I was like this specimen, like this alien.
Farouk, what a weird name. I don't know why your parents named you that. You should be Jimmy. I'm gonna call you Jimmy.
I had something inside of me being like, I don't know who I am.
I have to scream louder. I'm black, I'm Muslim, I'm here in order to be heard.
It took years to rediscover that assertive, bold person. Every day, I choose that path of resistance.
And this was definitely a fascinating look at what I loved is a diverse group of young Americans who happen to be Muslim. And we'll get more into your film as we go on the conversation. And now I want to introduce Julie Mallozzi, who is the filmmaker behind Once Removed and Monkey Dance. Her films, including Circle Up, have won awards at festivals around the world and screened in museums, universities, and on public television. Julie is an award-winning documentary filmmaker whose work explores the transformative power, excuse me, of traditional cultural practices in the contemporary world. And she received her BA from Harvard University and her MFA from San Francisco Art Institute. Julie teaches filmmaking at Harvard and is an administrative director of its Film Study Center. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
And we're going to first take a look at Monkey Dance, which is about 3 Cambodian American teenagers coming of age in a world shadowed by their parents' Khmer Rouge nightmares. And the traditional Cambodian dance links them to their parents' cultures, but fast cars, hip consumerism, and new romance pull harder. Let's take a look at Monkey Dance.
I see it like this. I can't have fun if I don't got no money, you know? What am I gonna do? I could work, I could go to school, and nothing out there can't stop me from doing what I want to do.
Both of my brothers, they didn't finish high school. I have to go to college. I have to help the family.
People are just waiting for me to fail. I can't do enough to prove them wrong.
Yeah, I loved seeing this group, and we'll get more into this discussion about what you uncovered and what you followed with these group of teenagers. But we're also going to take a look at a more personal story for you, Once Removed, a film you recently brought into the collection as well, about a young woman who travels to China, which is actually you, Julie, to meet your mother's family after a 50-year separation. And I'll just tease, there's all this crazy political intrigue that you end up uncovering. Let's see the trailer for Once Removed.
I'm not sure what I'm looking for in China, but I know I want to remember this, so I'm filming everything.
Julia 来国内看看我们的工作，来这个看看我们一些亲戚的在国内的工作。这个姨婆跟我们弟兄所有的全部这个都是muslim
Actually, I wasted a lot of time in Chile.
For my relatives, the cost of remembering the past is high. For me, it's a kind of luxury.
来，这个地方就是这个。这不写了，那么如果我这个死了，那么这些事情就没有人知道了。这样子我研究了24天，我自己也不懂。
这国民党就拿那个我父亲的这个尸体啊，就扔在那个杨家山的化学池里面，化为灰烬。这一代下次上场。
爸呢反过来就讲，他说这个我爱国我不错，到现在为止，他说我不认为我有对不起我国家的事情，有对不起共产党的事情，我都没有对不起，总有一天事情会清楚的，他就这样讲。
Yeah, no, thanks for Julie for making those movies. And I do want to say, like, I know we're talking about new perspectives today. And I think one of the things that we're going to kind of unpack is just how a lot of the films that we're spotlighting, they're kind of a time capsule in looking at the past, but some of those lessons and news perspectives that we can have today. And last but not least, I want to bring on Lailanie Gadia. She was raised in Guam. She's a Filipino-American community builder, producer, and financial professional based in Los Angeles. She's serving as the Asian American Documentary Network, otherwise known as ADOC. She's her operations director and finds purpose in supporting and empowering underrepresented voices through her work at ADOC and beyond. Lailanie is currently an associate producer on Tadashi Nakamura's third act and producing her first narrative feature, Shoots, while also supporting fiscal sponsorships at Visual Communications, where she has held various volunteer and staff roles since 2012. She's series produced, Emmy nominated, and Silver Anthem Award winning 2022's Asian Am Resilient Shorts. She was recently named a 2023 Documentary New Leader, and she is a 2021 and 2022 LEAP Impact alumna and graduated from Loyola Marymount University. Please welcome Lailanie. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Okay, Sofian and Julie, what was the impetus for you to make these films? Why don't we start with Sofian, since we saw his trailer first?
Sure, yeah. So our film really came as a really direct response to events in 2017 when we had Trump's Muslim ban. Nosheen Dadaboy and I had been working together on various other projects, and when this occurred, we both started filming. She was in LA, I was in New York, and we were at the airports. Just didn't know what shape this was going to take, but we were just following events, and that kind of turned into a short that we co-directed, also called An Act of Worship, for Field of Vision, that was like a very quick response type of film. And it was, that happened, and it was started filming in January 2017. I think we released it in May, so it was one very quick project. But between the two of us, we were just having this conversation about how we wanted to understand more, because we gotta get caught up in the current events, and sort of suddenly this seemingly random kind of explosion of Islamophobia, but it's really part of a much longer timeline on history, and something that we had experienced after 9/11, and even going back further as kids, after sort of around the time of Desert Storm and the conflict, that earlier conflict in Iraq. So Nosheen had a vision of something that she wanted to do that would really be a bigger canvas, and the ban is part of the film. It kind of comes at the end of the film, but she wanted to really see this bigger picture. So that's how it emerged, and I really felt like she had this vision, and so we kind of went into these roles that she was the director and I was the producer, and that dynamic worked out really well. I'm kind of first time, I've produced on my own projects, but it was the first time really focusing in as a producer, and that's kind of how it came about. And it was we'll probably talk more about sort of the scope of the film, but it was really pretty ambitious, and hopefully we got some of what we were trying to get into the film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, coming from a very personal space and experience, I think makes it all the more authentic. Julie, how about you? There were two very different films. One was very personal, and one was a group of teens. I'm kind of curious as to what were the impetus and even how you found the teens in Massachusetts.
Sure, yeah. Well, Once Removed was my first professional film that I made after I graduated from college. Actually, first I was living and working in South America and sort of enjoying being able to pass as a person of mixed background and being able to speak Spanish. I worked there, and then suddenly it sort of dawned on me that like here I am living in South America, but I actually know almost nothing about my own Chinese heritage. I'd grown up in rural Ohio. My dad's Italian American, didn't grow up speaking any Chinese, and so when I got back from South America, I kind of committed myself. I spent a year or two learning Chinese on my own, contacting relatives in China, and basically preparing to make a trip there to find out what had happened to my family after my mother had left 50 years earlier. And she's 85 now and has still never returned. There's complicated reasons maybe behind that, but so this was kind of like embarking to find out what happened to them. And one thing that this was the 90s, and I will say that as a person at that time, I feel like as a filmmaker making as a sort of ethnic American filmmaker, as it might have been called at that time, going to your country of origin, everyone assumed that you're making a film to find yourself, find your own identity. And for me, this was much more about history and kind of learning about my family's entanglement with the political history of China in those years, and about memory and how that relates to history and decisions people make in their lives. So I did learn something about my own identity too, but it wasn't my quest. And I do remember struggling a little bit with being kind of pigeonholed that this was about finding out, who I am. Am I Chinese or am I American? And I never had any doubt about that. In terms of monkey dance, that one came about a little bit of a random thing. I saw a newspaper article about the Lowell, Massachusetts Police Department teaming up with Big Brother, Big Sisters and the Angkor dance troupe, a traditional Cambodian dance troupe, to try to keep kids out of gangs using traditional Cambodian dance as a means. And I thought, wow, that's really intriguing. This idea of that traditional culture might actually help us address some of our contemporary problems. And I think there was also a direct link for me, having finished Once Removed, just wanting to learn more about the legacy and recovery of the Khmer Rouge genocide. I saw really a connection between what my family had suffered, including multiple murders in our family during the Cultural Revolution, and what the families in this city near me had suffered during the Khmer Rouge. So different origins, but there are some links.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is what I really appreciated about the films and your point of view is exactly what you said. It wasn't always just the personal, but the fact, the historical context of how those events influence, how we see ourselves or even how other people see our communities today in America. Let me bring Lailanie into this conversation. She works with a lot of filmmakers, works with a lot of films. Lailanie, why is film such an effective medium for us to share diverse experiences and histories from the API, Muslim or other underrepresented communities?
Yeah, and even just from this conversation between Julie and Sophia, and just even your films, being able to share just very different experiences. And I think for us, with film being, it's an effective medium because we're able to really break down that, our communities are not a monolith, and there's so much diversity, there's so much rich history within our communities that need to be told, that are not, taught in schools, that are, and so film is a way to really bring people to learn more about our diverse histories and our experiences, but also too to, I think, film is also a great medium because we're able to creatively tell stories. We're able to, share different, experiences, whether they're personal stories or if you're highlighting a different community. And I think that's really powerful in being able to highlight just the diversity that exists.
Absolutely. And, going back to like Sofian's film, An Act of Worship, I mean, that's one of the things, is the fact that it showed the diverse range of young Americans, whether they were born here or came at an early age, who happened to be Muslim, having to encounter all this xenophobia. And, that's something that I always have to correct people on too, when they kind of make these blanket statements about Muslims. They're like, oh, they're all from the Middle East. Or I'm like, no, that's not true. Sofian, how have you changed people's perspectives with your film?
I mean, I hope we have in some way. I would say just in terms of what working on the film probably even changed my own perspective in some ways. I mean, I grew up in sort of South Asian Muslim community. I'm in New York, and that's kind of my bubble. And of course, you know, starting to film with Muslim activists who are around the country. I mean, we started at the airports, but we really felt like we needed to capture a scope of experiences. So we were traveling a lot all over the country, in Tennessee, in Detroit, Chicago, and other places where some of our you know, characters were based. And I think that it was really important to try to, I mean, you know, it is an incredibly diverse community from people from all over the world. But we tried at least to capture some of that scope of diversity. But the thing that really, I think, was kind of eye-opening, but also just gave me personally some hope for the future, was just the contrast even between my generation and the younger generation who were, you know, after 9/11, it was basically, we were told to just keep our heads down and, you know, and not really talk about our background. And it was you know, it was a quietist type of approach. And just seeing the new generation and how outspoken, unapologetic they are, and you know, across this diverse kind of range of backgrounds, I think that that was the sort of common theme that I saw coming up again and again, and it just made me feel like, you know, it's really important that people have found their voice in our community. So the film tries to reflect that, and you know, both in capturing the diversity, but also that element of how things have progressed, I think, for us as a community.
Well, that's encouraging to hear, and I hope more people get to see this movie because I think again it personalizes it, and for the many reasons that Lailanie also, you know, mentioned, it just exposes people to much more diversity within our communities. Julie, with your films, they are very different, as we mentioned, and I know you know, you weren't necessarily, you know, going out to like find your identity. But how has your own perspective maybe changed as an Asian American, or even how you view, you know, others, you know, in the way that I know Sofian shared a little bit about how his perspective changed making his films?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I definitely grew up feeling somewhat othered by you know, the area I grew up in rural Ohio was really almost 100% white. Basically, we kind of were the diversity in our school and in our area. And yet then I also felt kind of like an imposter around people I would consider like actual Chinese people, right? Like, in fact, it wasn't until I went to China that I realized that all these things about my family and me and the way I grew up were actually not just our family, but actually Chinese things. I just didn't know that enough Chinese people to even be able to compare. But I would say making both of these films helped me really understand how individual identity is, that it's not something that anyone else can define for you. And it's also not something you really need to define for anyone else. Like I think both of these films paint a very personal picture of a kind of multifaceted identity, maybe not just intersectional with different sort of categories that overlap, but actually that each person's identity is forged from multiple life experiences, from where you live and the people you know and who your parents are and who else cared for you. And like me, I would say, you know, I have influence from Chinese and Italian American cultures, also from this rural white culture, from Native American cultures, because I grew up on a indigenous, like a Native American historical site in Ohio, and which, you know, we worked at for 20 years, ran essentially as an odd family business. That's another story. But I lived in Latin America, and I'm quite fluent in Spanish, and I pass, as I said, so I have some sort of Latin American connection. I'm married to a Dutchman. I speak Dutch. My kids are Dutch. Like, so this is like a crazy mix, but that's me. And I like to be able to touch all those things. So I guess I love to, in my filmmaking too, I love to see identity as a kind of resource, you know, that in my films, I'm looking always at problems and issues and social issues in society that we're struggling with in the now, and what are the ways in which reaching into our own cultural resources can help us present some solutions to the problems we're facing.
No, that's well said. I think, you know, one of the things growing up as the daughter of Chinese immigrants, I always struggled with my own identity personally of whether I'm American enough or, Asian enough. And I hear my friends who have mixed heritage, multiple heritages, oftentimes people want to pigeonhole them into one or another. And I think it's really important, for us to embrace kind of all those aspects that you just so wonderfully laid out. Lailanie, I know you grew up in Guam. You've got an interesting background as well. Kind of to add to the conversation, like what are your kind of thoughts on what's been shared so far about, how your perspective has also changed as you've been working in film and being around all these different filmmakers who are shining the light on these stories.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, growing up in Guam, I just, not didn't realize that, I could even go into, film and storytelling. And it wasn't really until, being around filmmakers and just seeing the power of storytelling, in person, watching films, meeting filmmakers that, it's really powerful what film can do. And, I think that's one of the reasons why, I wanted to be a producer and why I am a producer is because so many stories need to be told, and just being able to help support storytellers through ADOC, through visual communications, through my own projects are really important. And I think with storytelling too, it's like, because we need more diverse stories and wanting to push more diverse stories, we can feel seen, and I even just think, even just with our films, even just the films that were shared today, so many people have now felt seen. And I think for me too, that's one of the reasons why I push through and wanting to support filmmakers, and why I want to help, bring resources and being able to really get our stories out there.
No, the work you're doing is really great through ADOC and visual communications. And just a side note on visual communications, New Day Films actually has some of the archive films, early films of visual communications in our media collection. For all of you, this question, what are some challenges and obstacles you see today that prevent a wider range of stories being told from diverse communities? We know that's the aspiration, and finding a wider audience. What are some of those obstacles and challenges?
Yeah, I think just on the sort of funding and distribution side, I think that for our film, it was a really hard, people wanted it to sort of just be this sort of more sensational type of treatment. And as we were kind of sharing how we were framing the film, and that it was a really intimate look at a community, that we just struggled in terms of funding. Luckily, there still are the sort of we worked with PBS POV. There are these sort of distribution avenues that still exist, and there are funders and support like ADOC. We were funded by a lot of different great organizations that kind of think about this and want to create space for not only like diversity on paper, but like the actual kind of storytelling approach that it feels more authentic to a community. I think that's something that is it's quite difficult to convince, I would say a lion's share of the sort of other distributors and streamers and these types to even pay attention to that kind of filmmaking. So that's what I've found.
Yeah, I would totally agree that I think there's like an ethical thing about, what does it mean to form relationships with people and build trust and build an understanding that the filmmaker can represent fairly and authentically someone's story. And I think there's been a pattern historically of people kind of dropping in, especially people who are independently wealthy, like to the extent that class overlaps also with ethnicity or identity, but that there's an issue of people who have funds already to be able to come and film and get quite far in the process on their own money before they need to raise money. Dropping in, filming, and then leaving, making a film, not sharing it even in rough form or even in final form with the communities they're filming before they distribute it. So I think there are more and more supports in place now for filmmakers of color from various backgrounds. So that's been really great to see, because I really think it was a real serious issue.
Yeah, that's always the case. Lailanie?
Yeah, definitely. I think funding and distribution are just, I think some of the main challenges. And I think another thing too that I also want to highlight too is just even filmmaker sustainability. And, documentary is hard, and being able to sustain your lifestyle, being able to provide, I think, is a really important challenge that a lot of filmmakers face. And it's how can we support ourselves and our well-being, and to really even just create the films and have space to create films. And I think that's, but there is, more resources are coming around, but I think it's one of the reasons why, with ADOC, I just love being able to support filmmakers to be able to create that community, because, how else can you provide mutual support, which is a challenge, especially for, as emerging filmmakers, mid-career filmmakers as well.
I know I personally have appreciated ADOC's support as we were making our film all those years ago, and I guess it wasn't that long, a few years ago, but the fact that it does sometimes feel kind of lonely, and to Sofian's point about people wanting a certain narrative, I think there's this constant desire to foreignize communities of color, and if it's not what their idea of what somebody Chinese American should be, or somebody Pakistani American should be, or Muslim, like they're like, well, that's not what we think it is. And it's like, but we're the people that live that life, and we're not like that. Talking kind of further on, I think, like impact, we talked a little bit about the challenges, but I know Julie and Sofian, in particular, I think you want your films to be used in an educational setting. We have a lot of librarians here. We have professors here. We have community members here. Like, what are ways you see your film, and what are ways you want to see your film being used in the community and in an educational setting? Sofian?
Yeah, I mean, we've been really lucky with, it was such a struggle to make the film, but I think once we had the film completed, that there was a lot of interest, from education, in an educational setting. Also, we had a great impact campaign, which is ongoing still, where we're screening in a lot of Muslim communities around the country. And I think part of, I hope that this sort of broader sort of the broadcast, and I was hearing from people who, around the country who'd seen the film on POV, who felt like they were being exposed to a sort of story that they'd never really considered before. And I'm really, so happy about that. But I think even the other gratifying element has been to play the film in our communities. And I think what Lailanie was saying about, being seen is something that our audiences were really happy to see, this kind of perspective that was very nuanced and was very from the community's perspective. So I feel like it has this dual, my hope for the film is that it has this dual capacity to sort of play to a Muslim audience who kind of understand this experience really well and feel seen, or feel like, they are able to have conversations around the film, bringing their own personal experience to bear. And then for folks who are just less familiar, who maybe know the headlines, who maybe know, this moment of like the Muslim ban, or, what the community went through after 9/11, maybe they have some small sense of it, but the film gives you a really emotional and really intimate kind of access to what that actually was like, over these last 30 years or so that the film looks at. And I feel like, we are in another moment right now with what's happening in Gaza, where I feel like it's very important for the community to speak out about what is going on, but also that results in getting targeted, and that it results in Islamophobia. So it's an ongoing, it's the film, I think, tries to reinforce this perspective that, this is an ongoing issue. And whenever these things come into the headlines and sort of fire up, sentiment against Muslims, that it's the same playbook, the same things are happening again and again. So
yeah, hopefully we can stop that cycle with more education. I hope we can solve world peace with one film, Sofian. That is the aspiration. If only it was that easy. Julie?
Yeah. I guess, you're right that there's a kind of time capsule element to any film, really, because it's filmed at a certain time. I'd say my film, Once Removed, captures China at a kind of turning point just at the beginning of a really huge economic boom, as freedoms were kind of being loosened with the opening before they were completely tightened up again, and now you know, quite authoritarian lack of freedom going on. And I think the film, you know, has been useful in courses, high school courses, college courses that are, you know, in Asian and Asian American studies departments, folks studying modern Chinese history, or people doing oral history and trying to understand how histories get kind of inscribed through individual memories. Monkey dance has been used a lot in high schools to teach about the first generation immigrant experience from a teenage perspective. And I think it also touches on some more universal things that are not so specific to Cambodian Americans or Asian Americans. Kind of what does it mean to be whole between multiple value systems, you know, that maybe those of your parents and those of you know, your friends and those of your teachers and the community around you and the pop culture and the all of that. And I think also historically, just universally looking at resilience from genocide. Again, unfortunately, still a relevant topic today, that like how do people as individuals, as communities, come back from these horrible episodes that are happening. And in the case of monkey dance, it had to do a lot with traditional dance, a traditional cultural element that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, that became, you know, this was something people learned in the refugee camps in Thailand because they wanted to save their culture as they were being dispersed around the world. And they thought, you know, we need to preserve this. And they were teaching each other to dance in the refugee camps with the explicit idea that we got to keep our culture alive. So yeah, I think these things are particular, but they have some universal, you know, resonance and relevance.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you, in that moment of time with both those films, like captured both of those experiences, because, you know, I think back in those times too, like that wasn't being captured. You know, we didn't have ADOC around, you know, and Lailanie, I know there's, you know, besides New Day Films, obviously we have an extensive collection of films on the Asian American experience, you know, Asian, East Asian studies, about, you know, Islam and religious studies and South Asian experiences. What are the resources, you know, can you share too? I know you work with a lot of films. I know ADOC has got several resources themselves. Can you share with us some other resources that would be good for those who are watching today to see more diversity of these stories?
Yeah, you know, ADOC, we have a film database, you know, and I can also drop that in the chat. You know, and I think for us, we collect a lot of, you know, films from a lot of our members, you know, a lot of them link out to the educational distribution links, you know, and we really just want to be able to have this resource so that, you know, folks can come and look based on topic, based on theme, you know, and you can kind of filter it. But we really wanted to have a more comprehensive database where, you know, folks can come in and really, like, if you're looking for something specific or just even want to peruse the database. And then also too, you know, with visual communications, they have the VC archives, you know, which is one of the largest archives in Asian American Pacific Islander communities. And so I think these, you know, definitely two resources. And you know, I think for us too at ADOC, you know, we are going to be at the NCORE conference, you know, at the end of May in Hawaii, and, you know, being able to bring films to different conferences, I think is also really important too, to just get more of our stories heard and share with a lot of educators and, you know, different professionals that are really looking for stories.
No, well said. And those are very, very important resources that didn't necessarily, you know, exist for forever, right? In more recent years, the ADOC database especially. We're going to have a time for Q&A, just to remind our audience, right after we do a few announcements. But if you have a question for our panelists, feel free to drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And if you missed our little icebreaker earlier about your favorite salty snack, feel free to still share about your favorite salty snack and where you're zooming in from. Before we go into our announcements, I want to ask all of you on the panel here, what do you hope people take away from our discussion or your films today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'll just say that, you know, for us, we felt that there was a need to make this film because there's no shortage of just really simplistic, flattened kind of depictions of Muslims, either connected to terror or some sort of exoticizing sort of narrative. And I'm grateful for the educational market as like a place where this film can continue to live, because I do feel like educators are searching for, authentic storytelling that's coming from communities. They want to, share with their students something that's not a sensationalist and simplistic kind of way of looking at issues. So yeah, I'm thankful for having this avenue and, being part of New Day.
Yeah, I really appreciate you putting together this panel. I guess I feel like we're living this kind of TikTok era now where histories and cultures and whole lives are getting reduced to like a few second meme, basically, that circulates wider and then moves on to the next thing. And I just hope that, people can remember that the richness of like spending, as little as 1 hour, it's not that much time, an hour to watch a film or see an individual story and have the potential to understand, broader social and historical movements through this. And then I guess I'd also like to make a plug that films are, not only good in sort of traditional educational settings like colleges and high schools, but, like I've enjoyed having my films show at community centers and healthcare institutions and with judges and legal aid and faith organizations, prisons, all kinds of different places. So I think there's a place for using film to start conversations that can, help build communities.
Lailanie.
I just, watch films. I think for me, I've learned so much through so many filmmakers and their stories, and, yes, and kind of like what Julie said, as a way to start conversations or, be able to, think about different, programming opportunities, with different community organizations or just spaces. I think and because we don't really get a lot of that information or stories or nuances or experiences, sometimes through everyday conversations, but through film, there's that power to really create, to learn more about different communities that we're not normally around every day.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And I think one of the things that, we want to do here at New Day is provide resources for people. New Day has also just started booking series for filmmakers in booking, whether they're virtual or in person, at universities, at corporations, and other spaces. And of course, Lailanie, you being here today, and sharing the resource with about ADOC and the list of films that are there, and even visual communications, long archive of films is really, really important. I'm going to take a pause, and we're going to get some announcements in, and we're going to bring you all back for this round of questions from the audience. So if you have an answer, you have a question, and I've seen some people start to drop them in, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you prefer to private message one of us, that's okay too. If you don't want to ask if you want to ask anonymously, that is also okay. But let me just tell you that New Day Films, as we were talking earlier, that we offer a variety of licenses to stream and DVDs of our diverse collection of films for educational purposes, including ones dealing with films on Asian American studies, Islamic studies, and more. Visit our website, newday.com, to see our collection of diverse films. And for those of you who are attending, who have registered, I'm going to give you a little tip. We are about to run a 50% off DVD sale on our website. So we will be emailing you that exclusive coupon after today. And any other links that we shared, or that some of the speakers have shared, we will be emailing in a thank you email after today's session. If you're on social media, please follow us on social media. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter/X. We are on Instagram and LinkedIn. We would love for you to follow us, interact with us, and see what we're up to on our social media. The films that are featured today, as mentioned, are available for license for educational use through newday.com. Active Worship, Once Removed, and Monkey Dance. And we'll drop the links in the chat, as well as provide those links after today's session. If you're a filmmaker in the audience, or you know a filmmaker that's interested in joining our unique co-op and interested in educational distribution for the film with New Day, we have a monthly webinar info session that we host for filmmakers. And the next one is May 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern. So please share that with any filmmakers you know. We will drop the link in the chat. And now we will go back for some question and answers with the audience. I know there was a question earlier about where filmmakers can submit their films to the ADOC database, and Lailanie actually dropped the link where the website to submit that. I believe our film is in the database. I'm not sure if Julie's films or Sofian's films are, but if they're not, they should be. So
I'm gonna add mine. It looks like a great. I didn't even know about it.
Here's another questions. How have the communities featured in each film reacted to the films when they saw it? Sofian, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think I touched on a little bit that that's been a really gratifying, positive part of this process. What we have done with our impact sort of screenings is whenever possible, we tried to create like a space for like healing workshops and different things that because it's a movie that for the Muslim community is being seen, feeling a great positive feeling of being seen, but it's also traumatic stuff that we're dealing with. So that's been whenever possible we've tried to do that, because I think it also just it's kind of just a conversation that I think is when people can share their own experiences that relate to what they see in the film, that it naturally creates a healing space. So it's been great.
Yeah, I love hearing about those healing workshops.
Mm-hmm.
Julie?
Yeah, I know Monkey Dance has shown a lot in Cambodian communities. There's a couple, it's a huge one in Long Beach and huge Lowell, Massachusetts is actually the third largest Cambodian city in the world after Phnom Penh, and then Long Beach, and then Lowell, Massachusetts. So, I mean, the film was shown like in the huge high school there all the time. And it's also interestingly been used by social service organizations like legal aid organizations and other community organizations that are kind of want to train up their staff on what the experience of the communities that they're working with. So that's been really cool. Or even working with other refugee populations. I would say Once Removed because that was my first film, and I kind of had a more passive approach to distribution. I put it with a traditional distribution company rather than the lively co-op that is New Day. And so it showed more in higher ed, and I did get it to local Chinese communities in Boston, which was fun. But I'm bringing it back into distribution through New Day partly because I want to reach new audiences, and I feel like, for example, there's a lot of Chinese students studying in U.S. colleges today, and I think they might be very interested in this. It's portraying a period just before their time, but not so far back it's tracing farther into history, but portraying an era that they can relate to with another young person. So I'm kind of curious to see sort of how that film will circulate.
Yeah, no. The next question is what impact did making this film make on you? And Lailanie, if you want to chime into if any impact on how watching the films or seeing specific films have made on you. Sofian?
In terms of working on my film,
what impact did making this film, I know you touched upon it a little bit earlier, what impact did making this film make on you? There's the question.
Yeah, I think it was just the kind of that combination of, I mean, for me, getting out of my particular bubble of my community that I grew up in, so that was eye-opening in that sense. And then also just being like invigorated by, I think, the energy of the younger generation that and also just like I think there's been a really positive step. We're talking about sort of the struggle of obviously getting these stories told, but I would say that comparing it to how it was in the beginning of my career in terms of like representation of folks from our community and other and other communities that have been underrepresented, that it's definitely been on a positive track. So we felt like we were seeing just a lot of good, as much as it was a terrible situation, seeing the effects of the ban and everything. We also saw a real signs of hope in many ways. So
Julie?
Yeah, I guess I would say, making these films really kind of shape, especially Monkey Dance, really shaped my idea of what I was going to become as a filmmaker, and sort of an interest in focusing on these ways in which cultural practices are kind of repurposed or, reapplied in other contexts, to help people with their lives. So, this is something my more recent film, Circle Up, which is also in New Day Films, is about, this, it's farther afield from my own cultural background, but it's still this idea, which is about a group of mothers in Boston from many different backgrounds who all had a child who was murdered, and they come together and sort of learn from traditional indigenous peacekeeping practices to use peacemaking circles as a way to reach out to the people responsible for the murders and to offer some forgiveness in exchange for accountability and for helping prevent more violence. And I was just, I think Monkey Dance kind of sparked my interest in this kind of story, which, I think will always be relevant in some way or other, I hope.
Yeah. Anything to add, Lailanie?
Yeah, I mean, I think watching both your films is, for me, it's just I get to learn, and it's like I didn't grow up with with the education of, like what's happened, here in America or in China or, within the Muslim communities. And I think it's just really important to have, our stories told. And I was just even thinking about, like, Cam announced the new media, their new film fund to elevate Muslim stories. And I think that's another, movement in the right direction. And it's just really powerful to just have these opportunities too.
Yeah, we have one last question actually related to what you just shared. So we have one from, how has support for filmmaking changed? And then, does New Day and ADOC teach filmmaking to communities, or what are some resources to these communities today to tell the stories, to learn storytelling, how to use camera, etc.? That was from one of our audience members.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Okay, sure. I know there's a few questions in here. How has support for filmmaking changed? And does New Day and ADOC teach filmmaking to communities? Or maybe we'll start with the easier one. Does New Day and ADOC teach filmmaking to communities? And what are some resources to these communities today to tell these stories?
We personally don't teach filmmaking, but ADOC it's a filmmaker collective. So we do provide support for filmmakers, mutual support, community. I mean, even through ADOC, we have some, programming, such as our, storytelling. We have two initiatives, our storytelling initiative, where, we are working with our filmmakers to create micro docs and shorts. And, we're going to launch the, new micro doc series of supporting 6 filmmakers in their stories, and then we've also have a lot inaugural impact fellowship in supporting 3 impact fellows in their impact projects. So I mean, I think those are opportunities that we've been able to support filmmakers and storytellers. And so, always, I get encouraged by the opportunities that we're able to even just create within ADOC, but also to just, I think the abundance now of, filmmaker groups and organizations that are really out there supporting that wasn't around maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, is around now. And I think that's really powerful that we are moving. We know there is progress being made.
No, that's good. Julie, you wanted to add
Yeah,
something?
I just I know that a lot of cities have programs for people to learn filmmaking that are low cost. Like here in Boston, I know there's a lot of programs for youth that are free or low cost. Like the Institute for Contemporary Art has a program. Massachusetts College of Art and Design has a continuing ed program, and I believe a inner city teen program. The Filmmakers Cooperative, I believe, offers something. There's even a group called Community Supported Film, which offers filmmaking classes to immigrants and refugees to try to help, promote more authentic stories than what's often portrayed in the media. So I think also digital storytelling is a whole area. Like if you Google that in your community, that's a even lower tech way of getting into stories that are often, very impactful, that don't require any equipment other than, a phone or even a still camera.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think we could talk with you all day, and you are all very, very knowledgeable, have a lot of resources. I do, as we wrap up, want to give you guys kind of a final word, let people know how to connect with you, or, if you did have any last piece of advice for everyone out here. Sofian, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just echoing what Lailanie was saying about just just these great resources. I was really lucky to work with Firelight Media and their support, filmmakers of color. So I definitely think this might not be like a piece of advice per se, but just I would shout out if you're, looking for that kind of support. They're one of the great resources. Apply for their producing fellowship, which I think is open right now. But yeah, I'm just my company's Capital K Pictures. I'll put a link in the chat, and that's me.
Great. Julie?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to hear from anyone who has questions. I have a website I'll put in my chat, and there's an email link through there.
Thank you, Julie. And Lailanie?
Yes, yeah, you can reach me. I'll drop in my email too, my ADOC email that you can reach me at if you have questions.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you for sharing your insights. It's been a wonderful conversation. Hopefully, those of you who are watching got to learn a new perspective, or even, learn some new resources that we have. And we, again, will be kind of capturing all this and sharing out all the resources from the chat in an email subsequently if you can't copy and paste fast enough. We want to thank you all for attending and taking time out of your day for a Reframe and Refresh. We are going to not be doing a traditional Reframe and Refresh next month. We're actually going to be teaming up with Video Trust for their third Thursday virtual coffee chat, and I'll be speaking on a panel for programming called Movies That Matter. Reframe and Refresh is actually going to be taking a summer break, and we'll be back in the fall, so stay tuned for that. But we will be emailing information on that next coffee chat. In the meantime, have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you once again for attending New Day's Reframe and Refresh session today.